At this time of season 2020, we should have been 3 races in. Instead, we've had none. So I thought I'd have a chat with one of the most likeable characters in the paddock, Kimi Raikkonen's trainer, Mark Arnall. I'm in the Southern Hemisphere. In the Northern Hemisphere is Mark Arnall, Kimi Raikkonen's trainer. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Nice to be here. Nice to see you.
Now tell me, are you in isolation?
To be perfectly honest, I try and keep myself away from as many people as possible. So I only really go out for a bit of food shopping and try and get out for a little bit of exercise once a day. But other than that, stay indoors.
But just briefly, I want to thank candidly.com for supporting the channel. Candidly.com is smart training for savvy businesses. And with so many people working from home now, Candidly staff training is ideal. If you're serious about superior service, happier customers and staff, head to candidly.com. Now, a lot of people are very interested in your career because you're working with one of the most enigmatic men in F1, but of course that wasn't your entree into the sport. Can you give us a précis of your background?
Yeah, sure. So I was initially working in the UK in the University of Surrey, and I initially was teaching climbing as a bit of a side job. And a guy came in for a climbing lesson one day, and he was setting up a lab at McLaren, a human performance lab, and was just interested in getting someone to come in to do the sports therapy work. And I ended up going to Australia with McLaren in 1997. And David Coulthard, who I was working with at the time, had a back problem. I managed to fix it. He won the race. Kimi was positive. Mika at the time was positive about the whole thing as well. So I ended up doing Australia in 97, then carried on doing race by race, the races at the beginning of that season. And ironically, then Mika asked me to be his trainer. So I ended up giving up the UK stuff and stuff that I was working on here and started full time in F1.
Right. So typically a race is 4 days, Thursday through to Sunday. Can you just step us through what a trainer physically does at the track?
Yeah, I think, to be perfectly honest, every trainer is a little bit different with the way they approach things and what they do. From my side, I do the logistics in terms of getting to and from the track to especially the long haul races. I'm involved in that side of things as well. When we get to the track, I think a lot of it is just preparations, getting all the driver kit ready, preparing all of the meals with the chefs in the kitchen, organising the room to make sure everything's set up there, looking after all the stuff in the garage to make sure it's all in the right place, so the gloves, the helmets, the hands device, the earpieces, all of the other stuff that the driver would use. And then obviously another part of that is the therapy work that you do. So in the evenings, we don't do so much training per se at the races. If we do anything, it's more about recovery work, recovery training. We might do some swimming or something just to mobilize the body. And the rest of it is, like I say, just the treatment work, stretching work. So we do easy training, but nothing too aggressive.
How strict is Kimi's diet?
Nutrition just plays such a massive role in performance, and we're super focused on that over the race weekend. Obviously, outside of the race weekend, it's still super important as well, but you can have a little bit more flexibility there. The time where the flexibility is the most would be Christmas, where we don't see each other for about a month, and then Kimi can do pretty much what he likes.
How many days a year will you spend in his company?
Oh, that's a good question. Upwards of 250, I guess. 250, 300.
How much damage gets done to a driver's body in that car after a race, say, compared with a practice session? Is there a difference, or is it both hard work?
I think the difference is during the practice session, the driver comes back to the garage. You can give him a drink. So from a hydration point of view and a fueling point of view, we can stay a lot more on top of that during the actual practice sessions themselves. The race is obviously the long duration thing, so it's the one time where they are going to dehydrate a little bit more if it's super hot conditions. It's lap after lap, it's a bit more intensive. So I think the race is definitely the more challenging part of the weekend, depending on which race it is. Some races are obviously a bit more challenging than others. But yeah, I think from a damage point of view, all drivers will face different problems. So you've got an element of compression related stress in the spine. The drivers sit very close to the ground, so a lot of that impact goes straight through the body. So I think that's one element. You've got a lot of, if you like, torsional differences in the hips. So you're pushing very hard on the right leg, on the left leg, the braking leg, the right leg's on the accelerator. So the force you push through the body to brake is a lot heavier on one side than it is the other. So it's that asymmetrical load doesn't really help the pelvis and how that area functions. We need to do a lot of work to kind of keep that in check. I think just the position you are in the car when you're driving. Obviously, it's a worse position than we would be in if we're sitting typing at a computer or driving a normal car. It's a lot more kind of lying down. So that reinforcement of the bad posture is something we need to work against when we're doing the therapy work and the training, just to make sure we have body balance, which then just helps prevent injury.
And that neck needs to be so solid and strong, doesn't it?
Yeah, so with the neck, I think it's a bit of a misconception that we train the neck all the time, because for the winter time, when we haven't raced since the last race in Abu Dhabi through until the first test, obviously the neck hasn't had any driving, so we train it like crazy leading up to the first test. But as soon as the driver starts driving at the first test, normally by the end of the test, the neck's in reasonable shape. And for the rest of the season, we don't really train it so much. The driving takes care of the neck itself. The tracks that cause a little bit of difference are maybe Brazil, where you go in the opposite direction. So the driver feels the neck because they're going in the opposite direction to normal. But in terms of training the neck, like I say, honestly, probably after the first race, we don't really train the neck specifically because the driving takes care of it. So I think it's this sport-specific stuff. What's the best way to train to drive a car? It's to drive a car. And they don't really get to do that so much now in terms of in the testing.
But you would notice, obviously, in terms of attention around you and Kimi when you walk into the paddock and go down the far end, which is what happens at Alpha compared with, say, Ferrari last year. It's the top end of the paddock. There's a huge difference in attention, isn't there?
One of the biggest differences when you're in Ferrari, you really realise that there's a lot of pressure there. And it's pressure from the team, it's pressure from the media, the expectations of the fans. And I think when you're actually there, you kind of deal with it because you have to, and it becomes normal. And I think until you're really outside of that environment, outside of Ferrari, you don't realise then how much stress suddenly disappears. It's quite a unique place to be, just because it's Ferrari, and like I say, because of the expectation placed on the driver. I think in Italy, Ferrari is such a massive brand and has such a massive following. They want to see it do well. So there's a lot of pressure that exists there that isn't in other teams, for positive and negative.
And do you have to act bouncer sometimes when things get a little bit tight with spectators and fans?
Yeah, a little bit. And I think if I look at, say, places where Kimi's super popular, like China or Japan, the fans just charge at them. And in all the teams, I remember being in Lotus the first year, and we were leaving the paddock in China, and I said to the guys, look, can we have like 6 or 7 guys around Kimi just to get him to the car? And they're like, why do we need that? And then as soon as we started walking, we got absolutely mobbed. And Jeff at Lotus at the time, he said, okay, now I understand why we need some boys to kind of to kind of get you out, because they just jump. And everyone's so desperate to touch him, to get an autograph, to shake his hand, to get a picture. It can be quite extreme at times. So yeah, but it's not like that everywhere. But yeah, I do get involved a little bit with that.
Last year, I happened to be at the airport, I think it was China, yeah, at the same time. And they were out there in droves. I'm thinking, how did you know he was coming at this hour?
I know, exactly. Everyone seems to find out. It's like, it doesn't matter how quiet we try and keep the travel plans. They always find out which hotel we're in. They always find out which flight we're on, where we're going. It's like incredible. I don't know who kind of like gives away the information, but they always find out.
Now, I've got some nice pictures of you walking with one of Kimi's race suits. So you obviously do a bit of the, well, I know you do a lot of the taking care of his race suits. How many does he have, and how many will he go through on a weekend?
Yeah, Kimi doesn't change so much. He's one of these guys, certain kit he uses until it falls apart. So like race boots, gloves, he will literally wear them until they get holes in. And he's super particular. So with his boots and gloves, I carry them with me everywhere I go, just to make sure that we have those boots and gloves in the garage at the right time for the race. If I never put it this way, I never pack them in my normal suitcase just in case the suitcase doesn't arrive. And sometimes, like in the past, we've left it in the box in the garage and some stuff has been moved or replaced for new kit because someone thinks, oh, Kim must want new stuff at every race weekend. So with the boots and gloves, until it falls apart, race suits over a race weekend, normally 2, max 3. So if he doesn't use a new one every day, like I say, we'll keep going as long as it's not super hot, humid and sweaty. He'll probably use on average 2 a weekend.
Okay, I want to talk about 2 individual races. One was in 2018 when he won the US GP. What was that like for you working alongside him, and did you go out and celebrate after?
I think honestly for me it was one of the best victories we've had. It's like it's hard to describe because we waited so long in Ferrari just to get back and win a race, and there were quite a few times where it nearly happened and didn't, and I think that race in particular, number one, Kimi drove a fantastic race. Lewis was hounding him like crazy. And I think because we waited so long for him, what was super nice was just to see how happy everyone in the pit lane was that he actually won the race, because I think everyone was euphoric about the fact finally he's won the race. And his comment at the end of the race kind of summed that up as well. But and then, yes, we did have a good party afterwards and celebrated the wins. So it was honestly one of my nicest victories that I've been involved in. And for me, I've seen quite a few with sort of championship winning races from Mika with Kimi and other races as well. But for me, it was a special race to be part of.
And I was pretty happy too because I was front row at Parc Ferme, got a lovely shot of him. I wasn't the exact right spot, but with Ferrari you can't always get the exact right spot because mechanics, as you know, are pretty full on come Parc Ferme. And the other race was Baku 2018, and I was watching it again today with the gloves and steering wheel, and I saw you running alongside, and I know he mentions you. What's your recollection of that particular event?
I think if I was to describe it to anyone, it would be like being part of Cool Runnings, you know, the movie with the Jamaican bobsleigh team. It's like running down the pit lane was just like being part of that movie. And obviously we were desperate to get the car out to the front so we could actually get out again after the mechanics did an amazing job getting the car back together. And we were lucky with the red flag and the fact that we had the opportunity to do that. The car went out the garage. DG, the engineer at the time, was sort of running out there, sort of giving orders, and Kimi was obviously, as you know, on the radio screaming for his gloves and the steering wheel. So I was running next to the car. I had the gloves in my hand, and I had to literally just kind of judge the speed of the car, throw the gloves just in front of where he was to make sure they kind of landed in his lap. And I think I did it one glove at a time. So he got the gloves on, then he was sort of screaming for the steering wheel. But I mean, I couldn't help just laugh as I was running down there because it was just such a surreal experience, just being in that sort of environment. But we got to the end of the pit lane. I think there were a few other things going on as well. There was one in the front wing. There was still the adjuster in there that we had to take out. But no, it was one of those funny moments in F1 that you look back at, and the amount of Instagram sort of things I get about Mark steering wheel and gloves sort of thing. It's just it's hilarious.
And who had the steering wheel?
I think it was one of the mechanics. So the mechanic that normally puts the steering wheel on. There's two guys that put Kimi into the car, do all the seat belts, make sure everything's set up, and the steering wheel's the last thing to go into the car once the headrest has been put in and everything else. So I think they were still putting the headrest on sort of just before they started pushing the car out, and there was such a kind of like not panic but immediate need to get the car out the garage that the steering wheel hadn't been put on at the time. The car was on the trolleys, so the mechanics could steer it, so Kimi didn't need to at the time. But I think one of the mechanics was running along with the steering wheel. If it wasn't one of the mechanics, it was one of the engineers making sure the steering wheel was set up correctly. But I can't honestly remember.
Given the amount of years you've been in the sport, you must have made some cock-ups from time to time. Are there any funny ones you can relate?
Yeah, there's probably a couple. I think both with Mika and Kimi, I've given them 2 left gloves once as they got in the car. I think with Mika, probably the funniest one was, I can't remember which race it was. I think it might have been Barcelona. And we were in qualifying. And at the time we had a screen drinks bottle, air hose, and TV remote control. And Mika at the time was fighting against Michael for the qualifying, and Mika had gone out and he had done his lap, stuck it on provisional pole position. And I'm kind of looking through my pockets thinking, okay, there's the screen, got the air hose, got the drinks bottle, there's something missing. Mika came back into the garage, waved me over and gave me the remote control back. So I was like, oh God. So he managed to drive, put the car on provisional pole with the remote control in the cockpit, and then handed it back to me when he came back.
What do you do during the race? Once you've packed him into the car and he's on the grid, do you sit down and have a cup of coffee, or are you on duty still?
I wish. I do the pit board. So while the race is on, and whenever Kimi's driving, I do the pit board. So that's just, it's actually quite nice in a way, because it gets me more involved in the actual driving side of things itself. So during the practice sessions, qualifying and race, I do the pit board for him. So no rest, no chance for a cup of tea.
Did you watch Drive to Survive?
I haven't yet, no. Everyone says it's really good. And in this sort of moment of self-isolation, as it were, I will probably get round to watching it. But I've had really positive sort of feedback from friends and family that have watched it. But I have to admit to not watching it yet.
And you obviously know Kimi's line at the end about it just being a hobby.
I have heard that, yes.
That's an amazing line, and certainly to save it right to the very end of the series was, I think, a master stroke. What do you love about the sport, and what do you perhaps don't love so much?
I really enjoy all of it. It's for me, it's just become part of my life, as it does for many people. And having done it now for 24 years, I think you just consider the way we kind of like do our stuff just normal. So I think I enjoy the travel for a start. Travel is something for me that I've always enjoyed. And I think we're privileged in a massive way to be able to experience all of these different countries, see it in the way that we do. I know for some people the travel's not the most positive thing and they don't like it so much. So that side of it for me has always been good. I think the sport itself has gone through different periods where it's always changed to a certain degree, but like I say, as a sport itself, I enjoy being part of Formula One. It's I think you sometimes forget that you are in the pinnacle of motorsport, and we're in this environment where the world watches for the race weekend. But like I say, I think for me, I can't think of any element of it really that I don't enjoy. From a negative side, I guess it's not quite so bad for me. My girlfriend, she runs her own business, so she can come to a lot of the races with me. For me, that worst part doesn't really exist. So it's quite lucky in that respect.
Fantastic. Mark Arnall, thanks for chatting.
Great to speak to you. Enjoy your day there.
And before you head off, please like this video if you've liked it, and subscribe if you haven't done so, and click the bell so you get notified of upcoming videos. All of my images are available for sale at prostarpics.com. You'll see my podcasts and blogs at kimellman.com, and for my best pics live from the track, if we ever get to one, and throughout the week, head to Instagram at Kim Ellman. Thanks for watching, and stay passionate.